It's a statistic that many may find surprising. Up to 50% of cases in which couples can't have babies, the problems are due in some way to men. And although more fellas are talking about it, male infertility remains somewhat stigmatised.
Today we're opening up the conversation. We're going to have a look at the common causes of infertility in men and the healthiest way to walk the path to parenthood.
And we welcome Dr. Frank Quinn from IVFAustralia to the studio with us this afternoon. Good to see you. Look, there is a misconception out there that infertility probably has a lot to do with women. So just clear it up. What are the statistics?
Well, it's for the men, they're just as likely to be a factor for a couple not getting pregnant. So I normally say to my patients, 40% of the time it'll be a male factor, about 40% of the time it'll be a female factor, and probably 20% we don't have a cause. And on that point, because the male is just as common as the female, that should be one of the first tests that we do when couples are having problems getting pregnant, because it's sort of a cheap, non-invasive test. And unfortunately, it's probably one of the later tests that we do actually do.
Right.
There's been one study that has suggested that sperm count has actually declined more than 50% in, say, 40 years or less. So how is that happening?
Well, this is not a new sort of debate. Over the last 10 years, there's been lots of research papers that have come out addressing sperm counts in men and their potential decline. This last study was a meta-analysis. So basically what it did was it pulled a whole lot of studies together to try and get larger numbers, to try and making the results a bit more meaningful. And what they actually looked at was just the total amount of sperm in a male's ejaculate and follow that up over sort of 40 years. And they did find that the sperm count declined by about 50% in that time. But one of the limitations of the study is that it only looked at sort of how many sperm were there. It didn't actually look at, you know, the good swimmers that are there. When we do a test, a semen analysis on a man, you want to see how many are there, and you want to see how many good swimmers are there, because it's the good swimmers that are going to swim up the uterus and the fallopian tube and introduce itself to the egg and fertilise the egg. And because I haven't addressed that, there's some sort of, debate as to whether, what actual impact is this happening on men.
OK, but we hear stories, Charlie Chaplin was having babies in his 80s. So, like we hear of a biological clock for women. Is there a biological clock for men?
There definitely is, but it's probably not quite to the same degree. There's definitely a biological clock in men. To give you an example, a woman when she's probably early 30s, if she gets pregnant, the risk of things like Down syndrome are probably about 1 in 1,000. And when she gets to her late 30s, it increases to probably about 1 in 100. So in 10 years, it's increased about tenfold. And that's what a lot of people are focused on. But likewise with men, if you look at men, when they have children, when they're 25 compared to, say, 65, you find that older fathers, there's a higher instance of things like autism, schizophrenia, depression, and certain single gene defects like Alport syndrome and achondroplasia, dwarfism. But the increase in those risks over 40 years is probably about 8 or 10-fold. So it does increase, but probably to a slower rate.
Don't put a laptop on your lap, right? Because that can cause a thing, and it's quoted here, toasty testicles.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of the testicles being in the scrotum is because it's a degree cooler than the core temperature. So that's the optimal temperature for spermatogenesis, and that's the way we were designed or evolved. So anything that's any excessive heat, and I think the key word here is excessive heat around the scrotum.
Like a sauna or something like that?
Yeah, but I would be more concerned about someone who's commuting on a train for 2 or 3 hours that's got very, very hot laptops on their waist. The occasional iPad watching TV, that's not a problem at all.
Right.
For some men who may be exposed to naked flames with sort of welding or, cooking and things like that for a prolonged period of times, then, you probably want some protection.
Right.
And the other classic is, they talk about, middle-aged men in lycra out cycling and what effect that has on spermatogenesis. The male that goes out cycling for 3 hours on a Sunday morning to have a coffee with his mates, that's not a problem. And in actual fact, keeping the insulin levels down, keeping the weight off, so there's less fat on the thighs and the abdominal trunk, that's probably going to be a bigger benefit than any sort of added heat.
Before we let you go very quickly, a recent article has said the experts are concerned that fertility testing is actually just an expensive con. What do you think?
Well, like all tests, like it's called the AMH test, anti-Mullin hormone. So it measures a hormone in the woman's ovaries, and it's a predictor of egg numbers, and that's all. Tells you nothing about egg quality. So it costs, not covered by Medicare, costs about $80, and it will come back and say for a woman, her egg numbers are low, average or high for similar age women. My advice is if women are thinking about doing it, they should chat to their GP before they do the test, because if it does come back low, then they want to know, am I in a position where I can do something about it?
Yeah.
In my situation, I do them all the time because I see people doing IVF, and that's a good marker as to how they'll respond to drugs and fertility and success.
A good first step. All right. Terrific to have you with us. Thank you so much, Doctor.
No worries.